Alright, hello everyone, and good evening. This will be a wonderful, wonderful edition of Viewer's Choice. And I chose 4 of these games out of many emails. And I have to say, these people played like 2800s when they were 12 years old. So that's pretty good, actually. And obviously I'm joking, but these were really good quality games. And even though there will be some mistakes here and there, they had some good thing going on these games. Okay, so let's start with Stewart's game. This was an English opening, but it soon turns into a Slav defense. Now, this kind of surprised Elia that White didn't play d4 early. And he was saying in the email that he was wondering how can he try to punish White for this delay of d4. Now, I know Rapport Richard very well, and I saw him the first time he made the GM norm. And instead of knight d7, what Elia played, the young Richard Rapport played bishop d6. With the idea of if bishop b2, e5. And there's a usual trick in this position, meaning if White takes on d5, takes knight b5, this is a regular idea, as White hits the d6 bishop and the e5 pawn simultaneously. But now comes Rapport's idea. He can play knight c6 in one go, that he couldn't do if you put your knight on d7. And even though he parts with his bishop, the queen and the pawn center will compensate for the lack of bishop pair. And he had a game, I think against Pascal, and it was an interesting game. So you played knight d7, queen c2, bishop d6, bishop b2, castle, bishop e2. So White is actually refusing to play d4 because then Black could eventually counter it with e5. Not necessarily yet, because White can take on d5 and knight b5. Although Black does have this bishop b4 check, and it all transposes into a long line that Ivanchuk plays. Instead, Black can play a6, and after bishop e2, play e5. And usually these positions are quite pleasant for Black, as even though he will have this isolated d5 pawn, let's say with c takes d5, c takes d5, d takes, knight takes e5, but after rook d1 and bishop e6, the d5 pawn will be very well protected, and the next move, Black will be able to bring the rook and just pin the knight, and Black has very good compensation. And just if you're looking for an approval from a great player, I just tell you that the Black player was none other than Garry Kasparov playing this type of isolated pawn positions with Black. So okay, Lie Detector, whom we don't know who really is, decided to continue with his plan, and only after e5 played d4. But actually, e5 is not a great idea. Can somebody help me why e5 was a little bit too early for Black? Why was e5 a little bit early? Yeah, takes, knight b5. And now this would have been very good for the White player. Because after bishop b8, rook c1, and White really doesn't have to fear e4 because the knight has a good spot on d4. Also, if Black plays something random, let's say rook e8, then I can jump on c7, and this is very advantageous. It's not just that White has a beautiful knight on d4, it's also that he's getting the bishop pair after bishop takes c7, queen takes c7. This is a very pleasant position for White. So Stewart should have played a6 first and then e5. The only other moment you can play e5 is if you're ready to just sacrifice the bishop pair and play bishop d6 early on and then e5. Then c takes, knight c6. Other times you must play a6 to get ready with the e5 break. But anyways, White decided to play d4, even though he should have taken on d5, I think. d4, and Stewart said in the email that he was thinking how he can punish White for this delay of d4, and I think he found a way. e4 is, in fact, the correct way to play these positions. Knight d2, and now the correct move was a6, stopping all of these ideas of c takes, knight b5s. And these are big threats, so if Black would play rook e8, takes, knight b5, this can turn into a very annoying position. Because if you think about it, this position is basically a reversed French. And in fact, it's a knight d2 French, as the knight on d7 is similar to the knight on d2. So Black played a6, which is a very good move, stabilizing the queenside. And White really needs to play precisely here, because otherwise he will lose because of the lack of space. And if we remember the idea of French positions, we might find a typical break in this position. Can anyone help me? What is the typical break in this position? If we imagine that we're actually playing a French with black colors, it's basically White is playing a reversed French. How can White try to undermine the d5 pawn? f3 is a usual way, but that would be a bit too aggressive at the moment, because it would make this e3 pawn weakness felt. Any ideas? What's defending that d5 pawn?
c6 pawn and knight on f6.
Yeah, the c6 pawn and the knight on f6. Now we're already putting pressure on the c6 pawn, kind of holding its ground for the moment. So we can't really do anything with the c6 pawn right now. But can we do something with that, about that knight on f6?
Oh,
g4. g4, exactly. Now this g4 idea was played by many good players. Among them is Ivanchuk. And Ivanchuk is a great player. We all know that. So g4 is an interesting idea, trying to undermine Black's center. And it's a playable position with mutual chances, because even though sometimes White wins the d5 pawn, but then this g pawn can also get weak. But White played castles, which is very normal. And now Black played a very good plan, rook e8. b5 could be a potential idea, but it's kind of risky as it would weaken the queenside structure. Rook e8 is very good and solid, with the idea of bringing the knight to f8. And I think Stewart's plan of bringing the knight to g6 is very good, because that's how you should play. And it's very normal. The rook defends the e4 pawn, while the knight on d7 is rushing to reach the h4 square through g6 and knight h4. So knight f8, h3, knight g6, rook e1, bishop e6. And actually, White is slowly running out of time. So he might need to look for a break. What kind of breaks White can look in this position? I mean, g4 is obviously out of question because we just castled there. So no, we shouldn't do that.
Maybe f3 now?
Yeah, f3. And for better or worse, the only way to just try to survive is to undermine this e4 pawn. And after it takes, either knight takes f3, I think it works, or bishop takes f3. And I think Because of this annoying knight h4 that would attack the g2 and the f3 bishop, black is slightly better, or even much better, but this is still the only chance for white to go for a game. Otherwise, he'll just be overrun by an attack, which will happen. Not in the fashion that it should happen, but it will happen. So white plays c5, and now black commits a mistake. Where should we bring our bishop? Black didn't move his bishop, but he should have. Where would you, in the audience, who and where would we bring the bishop from d6? Bishop where? B8. Bishop b8, or where else?
I mean, I wanted to set up like bishop here and queen c7.
So bishop b8 is an idea. As you correctly mentioned, let's say if white is oblivious and plays b4, queen c7 could be a nice little battery, yes. But this bishop on b8 can get awfully passive, and it also disconnects the rooks. We don't want that. Bishop f8 would be a tad bit too passive, and it wouldn't do much there. So I know, chess is terrible, because there's so many options and none of them is perfect. So I'd still go with bishop c7, because the bishop will be useful on this diagonal and will help us attack the white king, but doesn't disrupt our coordination like bishop b8 would. And the problem with bishop b8, and even though this battery can be set up, but then white can play Bent Larsen's favorite move, which would stop everything. Knight f1. Bent Larsen's favorite move is good to remember, because this move, anytime you can make it and it doesn't lose a piece, it defends your king side forever. Bent Larsen used to say, if you manage to bring your knight to f1 or f8, that means you're never gonna get checkmated ever again. I mean, in that game. So he played knight d7, not a great move. And white said thank you. But Elia wasn't perturbed and felt that, okay, at least I have an attack, and he went for it. And that's a good thing to do. Even if you make mistakes, at least try to throw your opponent off and try to mate them somehow. And it works in this game. Now white plays queen d1, but there's a better defending move for white. What would that be?
Maybe
Yeah, knight f1 again. Knight f1 is a winner. Because if queen g5, there's this very nice covering move, knight g3, and basically there's no more attack, because the knight covers everything, and the pawn-knight duo just defends the white king forever. The other way to defend is this usual way of bringing the bishop to f1, covering the g2 square. And if queen g5, we can do it old man style and just move our king away to h1. So there's no bishop h3 trickery, because we just take. And if you would claim that there's a pin, there is no pin there. And if everything is falling, white can still play g3. And because of this great defender on f1, white is not going to have any troubles. Also, knight f3 doesn't work, which would be annoying in general. The knight can just take, and we're a piece up. But okay, white played queen d1, queen g5, bishop g4. But this h5 move was very good, just chasing away this defender. g3, h6, g4, g takes, queen takes, h4. So actually, black has real compensation. I'm not sure if it's winning, but this bishop is just too powerful. So it does compensate for the lack of a piece. So h takes g4, bishop g4. And now white decides to play f3. Well, what's wrong with queen c2 though? How can white punish? How can white get punished after queen c2? Yeah, bishop f3. White needs to take. E takes f3. The king can't run anymore, which is annoying, because it would be just queen h1 mate, and end of the game. The only way to defend in these positions is to bring the queen closer. Actually, this stops everything suddenly. So black is still lost in this position for some reason. Because if rook e6, mate would be close, but there's queen takes f3, and white survives, at least for the moment. So f3 was played, but then queen g3 check, king h1, and rook e6 just finishes it off, because rook h6 comes, there's no way to stop that mate. Even if white would try to bring a piece to e2, then rook h6 check comes and rook takes h2 mate. So this was a very good game in general. Like Elias Stewart, you had the idea right, but you have to defend your bishop on d6. Everything else you did correctly, apart from this early e5 move, which you should support first with a6. So remember to play a6 first and then e5. And also, save your bishops. So the second game was a correspondence game between Ackerman Andrew and Trujillo Julian, which is going to be a Dutch defense. d4, f5, g3, knight f3, bishop g7. And as Ackerman pointed out, d5 is not the best move here. d6 is much better. In general, in these positions, when you play f5, in any scenario, be prepared to be worse. Because your king is kind of weakened after the pawn push, and any other pawn moves just make your position much worse. So this little pawn move on d6 would have been much better than d5, because now, honestly, this position just looks like a Swiss cheese, which is tasty but not good in chess. So d5 is not good. I would prefer d6 with the idea of at least bringing another pawn to the center. So d5, and Ackerman correctly takes it. Knight takes, knight c3, c6, bishop g5, queen e8. Now queen e8 is not a great move. Queen d6 sorts would be much better. Kind of trying to hold the position together. And because of all these weaknesses on e5 and c5 and c4 and everywhere, white is just much, much better. But it's still not hopeless. You can play these positions and hope for the best. But white is clearly better. Queen e8, queen b3, queen d7. Not my favorite moves from black. Knight takes d5. I'm not a big fan of exchanging already on d5. Maybe rook d1 would be a nice move. I know you mentioned knight e5, which is obviously a computer move, and the computers are great at checkers and Go and whatever, but not in chess. So bishop takes d takes e6, and it's still going to get a closed-up position. It's not, obviously white is clearly better, but it's not winning yet. I like rook fd1 better. It's more thematic, and you'll play knight e5 when it really counts. So knight d5, c takes, knight e5. And bishop takes e5 is a good move by your opponent, because this bishop is terrible. And exchanging in a bad position is always a good idea. And obviously the king side is a little bit weakened now, but at least the position closed up a bit. Rook c1, knight c6, bishop f6. h5, I'm not thrilled with this move, h5. Black should somehow pull his pieces together, play something like rook b8, with the idea of, let's say, a3, b6, and after rook c2, bishop b7. And now the position looks bearable. Black is obviously worse, but there are still fighting chances in these positions. H5 was too much. H5 is not doing anything at the moment. Rook FD1. The normal move, and I like it because you're kind of preparing the E4 break, which actually works much better because of this H5 push. Because the bishop on E4 will hit on G6, so that'll be great. A5, A3, slow maneuvering game, but it's fine. Queen C7, not a great move. I still like the idea of Rook B8 better, but then White would have an extra move that would just stop all Black ideas. What would that be? How can White stop Black from playing B6, bishop B7?
Oh, Queen B6.
Yeah?
Queen B6?
Queen B6, yeah, of course. Just stopping it, and she's just dominating the position. Black is basically in Zugzwang. There's no way out of this position. Queen C7, Rook D2, Queen B8, not the best. Well, in general, Black moves around with the queen too much. You need to develop those beautiful pieces on the queen side. You need them. Otherwise, you'll lose, and that's why Black lost. So knight d5 takes h5, a3, queen c7. Yeah, please play rook b8 next time and b6, not rook a7. That wouldn't make your life easier. Queen c7, rook d2, queen b8. And to be frank, unsurprisingly, White has a sacrifice in this position, which is rook takes d5. How does rook takes d5 win? The reason this sacrifice is not so surprising is because the rook on a8 is not playing and the bishop on c8 is not playing either. So basically White was a rook and bishop up the whole game. So obviously this rook sacrifice should work on principle. So obviously Black takes, bishop takes, king h7, and this bishop g8 is a very nice move, I have to admit that. Because if the king moves to h6, check, goodbye. It's a nice mate, just bishops and queens. But obviously Black took, check, king h6, takes, bishop e6, and mate. Well, this was a good game for White, not as much for Black. But in principle, if you have big development, try to open up the position as quickly as possible. So White could have tried to open up with e4 a little bit quicker, maybe. a3 was a nice move, so you gave a space on a2. But e4 would be a little bit more brutal, and I would have preferred that one. Because you would win like 5 moves earlier. Also, Black needs to keep it closed, otherwise you get the same position in this Dutch. So in Dutch positions, try to keep the position closed, and you can hope for your life. And if you open it up, well, start hoping. Otherwise, you'll just lose. Most likely you'll lose. So keep it closed if you play the Dutch. And if you're White, just open up the position and win easily. All right, that was a promo for the Dutch defense. And this game was sent by Nicolas Laure. Again, someone I don't know, so I named him Anonymous. It was also played on an online server, I think chess.com. And white played e4, b6, d4, bishop b7. Now b6 is a good move if you're Magnus Carlsen, and it's not bad if you're Richard Rapport. Otherwise, it's not the best move on the planet. I've seen better moves like c5 is pretty good. Fischer likes this move. Fischer is also a good player. e5 is not a bad move. Tad bit boring, but it's good. e6 is exciting. Don't play that. You'll have a fun game. d5 is a bad move, but fun move. c6 is a good move, but it's solid, and you'll have a bit more excitement than in e5. d6 is a fun move, but not a great one. All right, we've looked at plenty of moves you can choose to your liking. There are like 5 other moves that you can choose. b6 is not my favorite. Okay, d4, bishop b7, bishop d3. Well, knight d2 would be a nice move, because as you'll see later on, e6, bishop d3, the idea of bishop b4 is not as great as if the knight would be on c3, because white can just play c3 immediately, chasing away the bishop, and you'll be a happy camper. So bishop d3, e6. You can just develop your knight. There's no rush. You don't need to play c4, because now you transpose back to variation from d4 variations, like d4, e6, c4, b6. Now I'm more thrilled with this b6. Why? This is called, I think, the English variation played by Tony Miles and Nigel Short. So this is much better than e4, b6. Actually, to be honest, Carlsen played knight f3, b6 here. So after this bishop b7, the situation improved a bit. I still think you should play c5 instead. Unless you're Magnus Carlsen and you're watching this, play b6. It doesn't matter. So b6, d4. So yeah, coming back to this one. b6, this is a more respectable version of doing e6, b6 in this case, because e4, bishop b7, and after knight c3, you can attack the knight and pin the knight on c3. So this is fun. Playing e4, b6 is less fun because you usually don't get the chance to pin the knight. Bishop d3, e6, c4, and h6 was played, but you can just play bishop b4 check. And if white plays the passive knight d2, you just laugh and have a good game. If he plays bishop d2, then it'll be challenging. If he plays knight c3, you actually achieved your goal. It shouldn't really happen because bishop d2 is the better move here. And you exchange, queen d2, and white is better. But black didn't know that, so he waited one move. I'm not thrilled with this h6 move, though. If you want to wait around, follow a grandmaster called Spassky, who played g6, played knight c3, bishop g7, and this is McShane's favorite. Can anyone tell me what opening is this for black? Yeah, the hippo, which is everyone's favorite. I mean, Spassky's and McShane's favorite. Nobody plays it because it's not good. But bishop b4 check you should play if you want to try to play this position. So h6, knight c3, bishop b4, a3. Not the best move because in general black wants to cripple your structure. And you'll get this Nimzo type structures, and usually black will have a fun time. So you should have played something like what? What should white play in this position? Queen c2, bishop d2. Bishop d2 is amazing here. Just nullifying this idea. If black takes, white takes, you get the bishop pair for free, and you'll be better. If you play queen c2, it kind of feels funny a little bit here. Usually in queen c2 Nimzo Indians, they do it because bishop d2 in those early stages is not a good move. Bishop d2 here is more normal because you already own the center. You already own the e4 square. So bishop e7, knight f3, d6, castle, knight f6, e5. Knight h7, not the best. What should black try to do here? For a good reason, black played d6. He should follow up with the plan he had in mind. So d takes e5 would be the right move. And if d takes e5, I'd rather prefer the knight to move it to d7. And these positions are actually tricky, because even though the black pieces are a bit passive, this e5 pawn can become weak in the long run. You can see this positions in Ackerman defenses. Let's say we'll move back a little bit. Knight f6, e5, come on, d5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, c6, bishop e2, bishop g4. Let's say castles, bishop takes f3, takes, e6. And this is a typical position. You can find plenty of Caro-Kann short, rapid games on this one, where Caro-Kann won. White can play c4, knight e7. And in the long run, short and anyone who plays this type of positions, they're trying to play against this e5 pawn. But white has a slight advantage because of the space advantage. But black has his own play of going knight d7, knight g6, trying to undermine on e5. All right, coming back to the game. h6, bishop d3, a3, bishop e7, knight f3, d6. So you should have black should have definitely taken on e5 and play knight fd7. Knight h7, bishop at e4 is a good move. Why is bishop e4 such a fantastic move here? What are you saying? Yeah, he's trying to weaken the white squares, and also the only good piece that black has is this bishop on b7. So after c6, job is well done for white, because there's no more good pieces for black. Queen c2, just asking where this knight is headed. Knight g5, knight takes, bishop e3. Bishop e3 is a solid move, but I think there's one slightly better move here, and that is f4. Just trying to attack black while he's still uncastled. White does it a move later, but if you can do it immediately, do it immediately. Queen c7, f4, bishop e7, f5. Takes, g6. And I can see that everyone loves sacrifices these days, so rook takes f7 doesn't really surprise me now. King takes f7, bishop takes g6. And like the same theme from the other game, we can see that rook on a8 is not quite developed yet, so sacrifice is more than likely to be good. King g7, rook f1. Oh, I jumped a little bit. Rook f8, bishop takes h6, takes, bishop h7, and there's nowhere to hide. How can we finish off black in this position? Black has basically one pretty okay-ish move here. Yeah, king g5, running to the hills, but no hills there. King g6. queen f5 mate. So in general, oh, it's a check. Oh, it's just a check. Ah, it's such a shame. Okay, so queen e4, and let's just slide down and mate.
There we go. Can you go back to
Yeah?
after
Here?
instead of queen g6, can you play knight e? No, you'll block the
Knight e4
queen. Knight
is fine, but queen g6 just sliding down and mating on c2 is slightly nicer. So it's a nice mate, but black really needs to develop those pieces on the queen side. That's the moral of the story. White needs to avoid these bad pawn structures. Unless he really wants to mate, then it doesn't matter. You can ruin your structure, but then mate your opponent. Okay. So the last game is coming up, and it was a pretty good game by the Slovenian player Nick Sturgel. And as he told me in the email, he said, I was looking to play a position similar to the Argentinian tragedy. Well, let's see how it goes. e4, c5.
That was like 3 games.
Bishop, yeah, that was like 3 games. But who was the innovator of that game?
No, it was like Najdorf, Pano, and something else.
Yeah.
Geller.
So Sergio plays knight d7, which I think, unbeknownst to him, is a deviation from the Argentinian tragedy. Because h6 is the move. Bishop h4, g5 takes, and knight fd7 is the move. Takes, f takes, queen h5, king f8, bishop b5. And as he points it out, after rook h7, it's a long, long line, and who knows what goes on there. Actually, the innovator who played this bishop b5 move was none other than the person who always went second and never first. Who is he?
Geller?
Not Geller,
Flores?
Paul Karras.
Yeah, Flores,
So poor Karras, who was forced to play for the Soviet Union, even though he was Estonian, and he had to switch federations because the country was annexed at the time, played this amazing bombshell against the Argentinians, and their team won 3-0. All the boards they played, this bishop b5 idea, they won the game. So remember Paul Karras, he was an amazing player. So knight d7, castles, bishop h4, g5, f takes g5, knight e5. And I have to applaud the black player for being so creative, even though he missed a very nice idea by white here. What can white play here?
Pawn takes.
Pawn, yes, pawn takes f6, knight takes f3, and pawn takes e7. Queen c7, g takes f3. And this kind of reminds me of Fischer games where he had 3 pieces against the queen. And in general, that's a good trade for the one who has the pieces. So even after b5, we have like tactics galore here for white. White can sacrifice like anything. Can go knight f5, because if it takes, then knight d5, and every kind of tactics work. Or just the more lax bishop takes b5 and winning. Because if a takes, knight takes b5, if the queen moves, knight takes d6 check, and knight takes f7. And we're on a roll, and we're going to win everything, including this game. So he played queen e2, and after that knight fd7, there is no knight takes e6 anymore, because these knights are much better placed now. So for good reason, your opponent played king b1, h takes g5, bishop takes f2, bishop f2. In this game, black will play amazingly. b5, a3, bishop b7. Does this position look similar to you? Can anyone remember someone who just came out of retirement playing a similar position?
Could be Kasparov.
It could be Kasparov, and most likely he is the one. Yeah, this reminded me of his game against Dominguez. And this game will be no less amazing. Black is playing pretty good here. So g4. Black plays rook c8, bishop g2, and pow! Rook takes c3. And this is a well-founded sacrifice. It usually works in the Sicilian because white will get a structural weakness. And as I learned recently, doubled pawns actually are worth one pawn. So basically, the pawn structure and the doubled pawns compensate for the material deficit for black. So queen a5, hitting all those pawns, knight b3, queen takes c3, bishop d4, queen c7. And after the job well done, the black queen drops back to c7. So can someone help me evaluate this position? Who's better? Who's worse? What are the odds someone's going to win this game?
Looks like black might be better.
Yeah, black is clearly better. Why is black clearly better?
King is protected even though it's in the
Yeah, the king is very well protected in the center. White's king is terrible.
bad.
Yeah, also white's pawn structures are horrible as well.
And even though he's down material, it's
So,
much better.
yeah. So even though black is down material, he is better. I'd even venture as far as black in the long run must win this game because white's position is prospectless. There's nothing you can do. You're basically just waiting for black to execute his plan and you'll just be waiting. So king h4 takes, bishop b2, rook g8, bishop h3, knight c4, bishop c1, knight de5. Now knight de5 is a fine move, but is there any other plans black could do in this position?
Maybe knight b6.
Yeah, knight db6, the plan of knight a4. And this won't be fun. After knight a4, rook d3, you might even risk bishop f6, making a dragon bishop out of this Najdorf bishop. And the end is near for white. So I think knight b6 would have been slightly better. So knight d5, rook g1, bishop g5, takes, king a2. Bishop g5 was a good move though, because black is getting rid of the only good defender of white's position. Takes, king a2, a5, knight d4, queen c5. And that a3 pawn is kind of weak. Can white defend that pawn without losing any material? Yeah, it's difficult. So rook d3 would be the only idea, but that will lose material, and white didn't want that. In general, though, it should have been played, though, because if black takes, at least we've got rid of that nasty knight on e5, and white is not that much down in material here. Knight takes b5 just loses a piece. Takes, rook b1, queen c5. Black loves putting his queen on c5, I can see. Rook takes b7, queen g1, rook b3. And guess what? The villain of this game returns to c5 yet again, causing havoc and devastation. Queen f1, a4. And now, out of desperation, white played rook b4, takes c3, queen takes c3, rook b8, king e7, queen f2. And queen c2 check is a bit too solid for my taste. Maybe, I don't know, knight c2. And just having a mate threat here, there, everywhere would be slightly better. Queen c2 is also winning though. And after queen c2, knight takes c2. Might resign for a good reason. He's down too many material. So apart from an early hiccup from the Slovenian player, meaning knight e5 wasn't the best because g takes f6 could have been played, and white would have been much better in general and should be winning, black played a model game, and this is how you should play this position when you own the center and you have a stable knight on e5. And this was actually very similar to the game played between Kasparov and Dominguez, where Kasparov was black. And I advise you to check that out. It was played recently at the St. Louis Blitz and Rapid. So this was Viewer's Choice, and see you next time on Viewer's Choice.